This is Viva Fry.
I'm Dr. Peter McCullough.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is JP Sears.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Tammy Peterson.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
Hey, this is Brett Kissel, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Tuesday. How's everybody doing today? The number of ounces of silver needed to buy an ounce of gold now at near 30-year highs. Silver is bargain price when compared to gold, and it's a perfect time to protect a portion of your savings with silver. And Silver Gold Bull has a wide variety of best value silver for every budget. Simply text or email Grahame for details. Whether you're a seasoned investor or new to precious metals, he'll work with you to get you the products you need. It's all down in the show notes. If you're on silvergoldbull.ca or .com, just make sure to reference the Shaun Newman Podcast. Profit River. Well, I tell you what, here in Canada, if you're looking for anything to do with firearms and you're sitting in any part of this country, look no further than Profit River, all right? Doesn't matter what part of the country you're in, west, east, north, I guess south? Yeah, south? I don't know. I don't know why that sounds weird. I sit right in the middle, I guess south too. Anyways, anywhere you're at, I don't know why does saying south bug me? I think of the United States. Yeah, and I'm thinking Canada. Anyways, I don't know how that, all right. That's a silly thought here on this day. Welcome to Tuesday. If you're in Canada, you're looking for firearms and all the accessories, all the good stuff, look no further than Profit River. Check out their website. It's got everything on it. You can order right from there. You can also reach out to Joel. He's a primary contact for all you lovely listeners. His contact information down in the show notes, snp@profitriver.com. Anytime you're buying anything, whether it's in person, over the phone, online, make sure to use SMP in the coupon code. That gets you put in for monthly draws. And just go to profitriver.com. They are the major retailers of firearms, optics, and accessories, serving all of Canada to the west, the east, the north, and I guess the south. RecTech Power Products. I'm goofy today. RecTech Power Products, for over 20 years, they've been committed to excellence in the power sports industry. They've got everything in their showroom on the west side of Lloydminster, everything from Alberta-built aluminum trailers to lawnmowers, and then all the fun stuff, right? The quads, the Sea-Doo pontoon boat, the Lund fishing boats, skidoos, on and on and on and on and on. If you haven't stopped into their showroom, you should. Like, it is... I hope I'm not overselling. I don't think I am. You walk in, you're like, this is a nice showroom. It's a nice building. And the amount of machines they have in there is staggering, to say the least. They got a ton of options there. Golf carts. You know, we were at Shay's, my oldest's football game over the weekend. And, in football, full contact between 9 and 12-year-olds. You can imagine there's a few kids with some tears in their eyes getting injured. And constantly, the trainers coming out and slowly walking them off the field. And you can imagine this is why they have a golf cart in football, to just kind of speed up the process. I was thinking, me and Dust, my brother, were talking. RecTech should really put a golf cart there. Maybe I'll suggest that to them. They get a ton. I mean, it's kids football, but they get to buzz out on the field and show off one of their things. I don't know. I'm a goofball today. Welcome to Tuesday, where Shaun is all over the place. When it comes to RecTech, they're open Monday through Saturday. And for further details, you can visit them at rectechpowerproducts.com. Planetcom, when you're busy running a growing business, trying to stay on top of the ever-changing world of information tech, it can be overwhelming to say the least. That is, yes, it is. And they can take care of that for you, leaving you to do your things. For the past 22 years, Planetcom has been here to boost your productivity by proactively managing every aspect of your IT infrastructure, both in-house and in the cloud. This ensures you're not too tangled up to get up in technology to get things done. And if you're going, well, what does that even mean? You want a website built? Done. Go look at the ShaunNewmanPodcast.com. That's their handiwork. When it comes to security of your website, oh, wait, mine was taken. They handle that, right? When you're thinking of storing and all the infrastructure that goes around a computer system for any business, they do that. Just go to planetcom.ca and it'll walk you through it, okay? Substack, free to subscribe to. We had the Week in Review every Sunday, 5 p.m. And this past one, I wrote about Charlie Kirk. And that was... I wrestled with it for a long time. That was a really hard thing to get my thoughts around. I had lots of wonderful conversations. I sat with Twos and Chris Sims, and we talked about a part of it then. Then I had a whole bunch of you reach out, send things, and I just, I don't know, felt compelled to try and put that together. I don't know if I think I did an okay job. I was annoyed with myself, though, because there was just so much to try and say, and I just couldn't seem to get it to jive. You know, it's almost like a guy needed to write an essay on it, and I'm like, I don't want to write an essay on it, or maybe I do. I don't know. Anyways, the week in review this past week has that all there. It's free to subscribe to. I'm not blowing up your email inbox. It comes out Sundays at 5 p.m. It gives you, there's a, down at the bottom of this past week in review is the week in review, which is about a 3-minute video highlighting the guests of the previous week. That's where you can get that. You can also become a paid member and support what we do here on the show. You know, I probably don't point this out enough, but, we're not government funded. I know you all know that, but to make a go of it, if you want to become a paid member, would love that. And if there's things you want me to do on this side for paid members, you got ideas. You're like, it'd be really cool if you did X, Y, Z. I'm all about enhancing the experience of being a paid member and getting behind the paid wall. I want to do things that are meaningful for you. So if you become a paid member, feel free to comment or shoot me a text and say, hey, I'd love to see this there, because I'm always open to that idea as well. So the Substack, the week in review, this week, I guess, just talking about Charlie Kirk, and that was probably a healthy exercise to do on this end. We also have the new studio coming. Yes, it is coming. Yes, what did one of my brothers say? The last 5% takes all the time. It's these last things that just are taking time. But I tell you what, here's an exciting thing. The new chairs for the studio are on their way. They should be here in this week. This week they're supposed to arrive. Super excited about that. I am pumped to see what they look like. I'm hopeful they are what I had planned to have in there. So who knows? I guess that'll be something to pay attention to. If you're watching or listening on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. Make sure to leave a rating, folks. That really helps. All your comments help. If you enjoy the show, share it with a friend. I've been rambling now for almost 8 minutes, and I don't even know how this got away from me. It got away from me on a Tuesday. Appreciate all of you, and hope you're all doing well. Now, let's get on to that tale of the tape. Today's guest is a communications strategist, public speaker, and founder of Legacy Interviews. I'm talking about Vance Crowe. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today I'm joined by Vance Crowe. Vance, thanks for doing this.
Thanks for having me, Shaun.
Well, I was just saying to a buddy of mine when I thought about this. I can't remember when I texted you, but I was, since Charlie Kirk I'm talking about, I've been thinking a lot about it. And I'm like, I should have a conversation with Vance. I'd be very curious your thoughts on everything that's transpired over the last, several days. And just explore some thoughts there. So I appreciate you coming on. Before we get into Charlie Kirk, I do want to ask about fatherhood, because now you got your third. Congrats. I don't think you've been on the podcast since that happened. And so, hey, that's something to celebrate. And but 3 is a different beast than 2. I was just talking with a lady at hockey practice. She's like, yeah, go from man-on-man to zone coverage, and that is just a whole different thing. How have things been going?
I mean, when people say that, it becomes a cliche where you're like, yeah, I know we're moving to zone defense, and then all of a sudden you're in it and you're like, oh no, this is real. I have to now both get my 3-year-old dressed and make sure she doesn't accidentally smash her younger brother, and make sure that my 5-year-old doesn't think I'm preferencing the 3-year-old. And but it's this frustration that is the meaning of life, right? It's the like, these tiny little things shouldn't matter. I'm so frustrated with them. I want to get to the other thing. However, this thing, that we're talking about, raising kids and all that chaos, that is where the meaning of life, I think, lays.
Yeah, I would agree. after I've been talking about it a lot, but okay, so Charlie Kirk gets shot. And I was in a podcast at the time, and then all these videos, people were texting me. You can imagine the phone line, how that sparked after that. And I didn't realize, I just saw Charlie Kirk, so I clicked on it, then I watched it, and I'm like, oh, can't undo that. And I felt this, I don't know, numb, whatever the word is. I can never seem to just quite place the word. And the only thing that gave me a little bit of sunshine that day is I went home and the kids were arguing about something and I was just laughing. I'm like, and there's an escape in your children, especially when they're young, because they have no idea what's going on, right? Like, I mean, their world, what's happening is their brother was, every parent probably gets a chuckle out of this. Shay, my oldest, goes on the trampoline. He's just laying there. He wants a quiet time on the trampoline. Why he picks the trampoline, there's probably a bunch of reasons. So then my daughter goes out there to bounce on said trampoline. Well, this can't happen. And the whole thing erupted. And I'm just like, but Shay, it's a trampoline. And your sister just wants to do like gymnastics on it. Yeah, but I was there first and they have this whole thing. And moments like that just pull you out of thinking about the larger picture into like this little world that only parents get to exist in. And so, there's a lot of, I chuckle because, like the things that get me out of my own brain over the course of the weekend was everything to do with kids.
Well, we've talked about this before, that the Garden of Eden is a metaphor for childhood, right? Where you're protecting the children. They don't actually know about good and evil that's around, and you're helping them as they learn to name the animals, and they're in this protective place. And a parent's job is to prepare them, because when they leave the Garden of Eden, there are these angels with flaming swords that won't let you back in, because once you leave your naivety, it's gone. And this was one of those experiences where we had to decide, are we going to talk with our little daughter about this? Because Violet's very perceptive. Do you bring the news of the outside world into the Garden of Eden? And we did choose to tell her about that. And to me, I was like, are we doing something wrong? Are we robbing her of the Garden of Eden by doing this? But at its core, this is going to be I believe, a moment that is remembered for decades. Maybe as long as Martin Luther King or JFK. And so we did opt to talk with Violet about that. She didn't really understand it, but it was definitely a jarring moment to say, should I remove these children or bring some of the chaos into the Garden of Eden? And we chose to.
Well, go back to Thursday for me. I'm curious your thoughts on Charlie Kirk being assassinated, murdered, shot. I'd take your pick of whatever word you want to associate to it. And, you being in the States and, if you go back through all of our conversations since I first had you on, you are a man I respect in the realm of what is happening societally, culturally. You've been an early guy to find Jordan Peterson and bring him in and then face the wrath of doing that back in your corporate career. When you see what happened to Charlie Kirk, where does your brain go?
That was horrifying. I was actually on Wednesday, I was at a talk, and I had just given a talk about exploring complicated ideas and how you need to push yourself to hear things that you don't agree with. And I was watching an excellent speaker up on the stage, and I looked down at my phone and it said, this thing happened to Charlie Kirk. I didn't even really understand what I was looking at when I saw him get shot. And so for all intents and purposes, it might as well have been live. To me, it was. And then you're left grappling with this. And, I turned to an older guy that was sitting at a table with me, and I said, Charlie Kirk's been shot. I can't imagine how he's going to live through this. And the older guy didn't know who he was, but there were young guys in there. There were a bunch of college kids in there. I was like, I guarantee every single one of those kids knows who he is. And then going home from that conference, because I was about over, I flew home, and I didn't want to bring this up with anybody that I was flying with. So I felt the terrible pangs of loneliness, where you are dealing with somebody and there's something, and everyone you look at, you're like, I don't know what you feel about this, what you think about this. I don't really know anything about what's going on right now. And it felt very lonely and very isolating for the next until the next morning when my wife woke up and we were able to talk about it. And I still am just in a complete daze. Like, he is the very best of us. He is our brother, he is our son. He is like the shining example of the best way that you could go out and interact with your adversaries, with your enemies. And he was shot and killed. And I still am, it's weird to grieve for a person you never met in person, but I am definitely in the phase of grief.
Yeah, that's what I've been wrestling with. I guess my first comment on that is Mel didn't know who he was, right? And in fairness, I don't want to give too much of what goes on in the Newman household, but I probably have over the course of the show. Who am I kidding? It probably leaks out. But like, I wrestle with some of the darkest issues society has, and I leave my wife to wrestle with 3 children. And, like I try and, at times let it in. Sometimes you don't let it in. It's kind of the discussion. Do you let your daughter, understand the gravity of what's going on? And I'm not saying Mel doesn't pay attention to what society's going on. She just isn't watching Charlie Kirk videos, right? Like, and what I found interesting, and you brought up, you talked to the old guy's like, who's that? And I talked to enough people maybe closer to my age and older, and it's probably 50-50 on whether they knew who he was. I ran into as young as probably, I don't know, like 8 or 9, let's say 10 Vance, and they knew who Charlie Kirk was. Like, that's who he was speaking. He was speaking to a young audience. And when you talk about the best of us, it's like, yeah, this is something. And it's affecting the young, not as much the 70-year-old. And I'm not saying the 70-year-old for the listeners' podcast. Certainly there are. But the younger generation, like, there is a ton of outcry from them. And then the thing that's been bugging me, I wrote about it on Substack because you just said it. I'm like, I never met the guy, never interviewed the guy, never went to one of his events. And yet it's bothered me. It's just like, I can't. I brought it up with Twos and Chris Sims on Friday's mashup because I'm just, I don't get it. So then I've had a ton of people send me a whole bunch of different things. Some of it makes sense, right? Some of it I'm just like, yeah, I guess. I don't know. And I've been left with this. I keep using the word numb because I'm just like, I don't know where to place the feelings. It seems so odd to me. When Trump gets shot in the head, my first gut feeling wasn't sorrow. It was like, holy crap, we've crossed something we can't come back from. Like, this might be all a war type thing. Where Charlie Kirk gets shot, I watched a video and I'm like, I had the similar thought to you. I'm like, I don't think he can survive that. Like, that was something. And immediately it was this sadness. I don't know what else to call it. It's just like, what is going on? Every once in a while, Shaun gets in his own head. I'm sitting there. I hate to talk about myself in the third person, but I'm sitting there and Mel's like, where are you at right now? And I'm like, I don't know. And that was a night where Mel was trying to talk to me and she's like, you are somewhere else. I'm trying to talk to you and you're somewhere else. I'm like, I am somewhere else. I'm trying to think this through and I'm having a very difficult time.
I mean, I think that's it was one of those moments where I needed to talk with my wife, even though she, like Mel, doesn't really know much about Charlie Kirk, really avoids politics entirely. And but it was just in talking with her. I think for me, the thing that resonated with me and Charlie is that I believe very deeply in talking with people. In fact, that's always my guidance. You have a conflict with somebody, let's go talk to them. You are struggling to find a way out of this challenging space, let's go talk. Because people that have really ever thought about it know there's really only 3 options in a conflict. You can either lay down and let somebody just walk over you, you can talk with them, or you can go to violence. And Charlie was extraordinary at talking with people, and that's what he was doing. And he allowed anyone to come up, and despite the fact that they had not worked to build a platform, they had not done all of the effort to make it possible for this discussion to happen, he would allow them a microphone and a platform, and to watch how he handled all of this hate and anger and disagreement and people trying to embarrass him, he just kept coming back. And even if you don't like what he was saying, what he was doing was truly extraordinary. I've gone out and argued with a room full of people or been in the room when everyone else disagrees with you, and it's hot and it does not feel comfortable. He was doing this at orders of magnitude larger over and over and over again. And instead of becoming a cynical, angry, mean person, he was happy. He was talking about, hey, this is the way back to a family. This is what is going to provide meaning in your life. These are the things that are the best of what I'm offering, and they're free to you. And they shot him. Like they fucking shot him because they didn't want to hear that. They didn't want other people to know his message. And that is the darkest thing. Like somebody wanted to turn off that light forever.
What do you see coming out of this? I mean, it's so early. It's such a silly question. Not a silly question. It's a difficult thing to answer probably. But like, I don't know. I assume a lot of us went, after you get through the initial, like, did that really just happen? And one of the things you said about watching it is it felt like it was live. Well, shoot, you can rewatch it like it is live. And in fairness, when it gets sent to me, does it matter if it was 10 minutes before, an hour before, with the rise of the phone being everywhere and then being able to just put whatever you want right onto X, YouTube, etc., right? And just see it. It feels like it's live. I don't think we can actually comprehend any different. It's happening live for us. So it is live. That has gone through the world. The world has witnessed that now. There's going to be people who cancel their speaking tours, who now heightened security has to go up. Like, I mean, I'm not saying I want it to go up, but there's no way around it. Somebody's been shot. This is going to ripple into the next decade of how you talk when you're talking controversially, whatever that can mean to people. Security is going to go through the wazoo. They're going to have to. I mean, you can't say this is a one-off when now you've had Trump shot, now you've had Charlie assassinated, right? Like, and I even go back further. You had Dave Chappelle tackled on stage, right? You had Will Smith that's two celebrities, but still, like, the stage had kind of been, if you made a rush for it, you were up there. And we were seeing this happen over and over again. Now it's gone to a whole completely different realm.
Yeah, I'm a person that has gone out and spoken and been, where we've had security out for anti-GMO protesters, for animal activist protesters, but I never even felt slightly afraid in any of these circumstances. And now looking at the way that the world has turned, you have to ask yourself, like, is it a good thing that security is going to go up? It's going to mean that less people can see somebody that's got something to say. It means that the government, the people that have the monopoly on violence, now get more control. We're going to do more gun screenings, more metal detectors, more separation. As an outcropping of this, I think it is an obvious next step that will happen, but I hate it. Right? Like, I really, really dislike this. And to dissuade more people from talking means you only have two options left, which is lay down or violence. And once violence starts, it is a Pandora's box. This is like, I remember Jordan Peterson always talking about, hey, left, you guys are the quickest to go to the violence. But if the right goes to violence, they're going to be organized and they're going to be methodical and they're going to be very deliberate and they know what they're doing. But one thing that I would caution the right on is once violence gets out into a culture, there is no stopping it, right? We will see more and more cowards shooting people from a long way off. We will see people shooting the most vulnerable. So all of these like unintended consequences of this are so monumental. You asked me, what do I think will come of this? I really don't know, but I can tell you there's a term in kind of modern parlance called the normies, right? So you have the normies are the people that they're just going to work, they're just doing their job, they're just raising their family or doing whatever. In the past, the normies were told, if you just keep quiet and you don't get worked up that their ideologies being put to you in corporate America or in your coffee shop or in your whatever, your kid's school, if you just kind of put up with it, like, it's going to go away. They're just kind of doing their own thing. Don't let that. But the normies that I talked to this weekend, the guys that have always avoided controversy at work, have always avoided, saying something back to people, I don't think they're going to be that way anymore, because I think they see now that staying quiet or not speaking up doesn't do anything for you. And that I think this is going to create maybe some people that will be afraid and won't speak as much, but I sense there are a lot of men our age that are going to say, I've been quiet for too long. I've been afraid for too long, and now I'm going to do something. And I have no idea what that something will be.
Well, it's funny. I feel like I've been quiet for too long. Isn't that a funny thing to think? As a guy who does this show, and I don't know, I'm anything but quiet. But I watched Charlie, and one of the things that I always, somewhere in the back of my brain, I went, as long as Charlie's there, I don't have to be there. And I'm not saying I'm going to go around to college campuses. That's not what I'm saying, folks. But he was just a guy on the front lines doing things in the way that I thought, man, that is a tough gig. And yet he's doing it with a smile on his face, married, kids, like all the things that I really hold very high. And he's roaming around the United States doing it. I'm like, that's pretty cool. And then he goes away, and you're like, obviously not, like, what do you do with that? You can't do less. You can't, you can't just act like that happened in a vacuum. And, like, I don't know. I feel like I sit here and I go, I'm probably not doing enough. It's a crazy thing to say out loud, I think.
Well, I mean, I think the only thing that can be done right now can't be told to us by influencers. Even me, I went out and was like, all right, who are people that I like? I'm going to go listen to them. Let's go listen to Scott Adams, the creator of Dilbert. What does he have to say? Let's go see what Nick Fuentes, this new rising voice,
yes.
What does he think? What does Sam Hyde think? What does Joe Rogan think? And I think in part it's because you're so aimless. I went to church, and the priest gave a fine sermon, but he didn't say this is what you ought to do with the Charlie Kirk situation. And the core thing I think that is bothering me right now is that I don't know what the wise behavior is. It used to be intuitive and obvious that the wise answer was continue to talk. It was find a way through this, find a way that you can either get through to another person, or they can expose you to an idea that allows you to understand them better. But I feel like counseling, hey, let's just talk more, is not wise, because if the other side is being violent, what are you going to do there? But I find myself absolutely recoiling against the idea of, hey, let's band together and let's go get vigilante justice, or let's go get, retribution in some way. And the space in between those is methodical, patient, calm, thoughtful. And that is very hard. When just like you, I feel like I should be doing something in response to this. I don't want the energy to die, and I don't want him to have died in vain.
I feel like whether it was Charlie or someone else, this was going to happen. And I think the response is to keep talking, is literally to, and the danger of that, I think, has just become very prevalent to anyone sitting on, I think of you a lot, right? I've told you this a lot. Anyone who got to see you at the rural-urban divide years ago now with Quick Dick McDick and Steve Barber. Well, I've seen you firsthand on my stage, and I always like Vance. You're one of those speakers I've had that I feel like takes it as serious as me. That's a small category. There are others, but like I've been. I don't know. I can't give you high enough accolades for how you treat the stage. It's really cool to watch and be a part of. And I guess I just, in my head, I'm not going to let them take that away from me. I still revere that stage for trying to put the different ideas there, and the danger of it. Probably none of us realized because it had never been escalated to this point. But I will not let them take that away. I do not think stopping talking. You need to talk more, and I think when you can't, when you see the tides are changing, so to speak, in where the public, is slowly starting to shift and you're losing control, the emotional outburst is violence. And they did that. This guy did that. And I'm like, chances are there's only more violent outbursts. But if we stop talking, that is what they want. They, they don't want these ideas being talked about. They don't want people starting to understand, oh, that makes sense. Like, I think of Jordan Peterson, as one of the most influential people in the last decade on my life, because he started talking. And when he started, and then you go listen to the lecture series, you're like, oh my God, he's putting together pieces for me that have been rolling around in my head and I couldn't figure them out. And then walks this guy and they're just all there. And different things help different people. I have 900 plus episodes on this thing. And sometimes I think, man, what a junk episode that was. And as I think that, and I've thought that lots, there will be at least one person who texts me saying they needed to hear that conversation, which always shocks me because I'm like, what wasn't in that conversation? But there's something. And we're all finding our different things that help us put the puzzle pieces of life together, I think.
Shaun, I've told you, I think I've even said it on the air before, but I've told you privately many times that what you are doing, whether you recognize it or not, puts you in great danger. And I've never thought of it in terms of a lone gunman. I think your government could come and arrest you and put you in a cell for not just years, but decades. And I think that your government has shown on multiple occasions that they will use the force of the government against you. I think that that's the wild card here, right? It's not just, hey, there are deranged lunatics that are, going to do some lone gunman things and kill individuals, but then you also have the state to worry about. And so I think about this idea of like, we need to continue talking, and we'll let the security apparatus do it. We will let the government step in and try and resolve this conflict. And it does not seem obvious to me that that the natural course of how these things generally play out is going to put us in a better position.
Yeah, I hear you. But if I look back through history, the state has always been the state. The extremists have always done extreme things. There's always been events that come across in a man's lifetime that you have an option of, do they come and arrest me? I don't know. I used to get texts in the middle of COVID. I don't remember if I told you this or not, Vance, that it was like, are you still there? Like, they haven't come yet. Be careful. They might put a black bag over your head. Can you imagine getting sent that as I'm wrestling with everything I'm doing? I'm sure they were texts of like concern, but sitting on this side, it was like, yeah, no, I know nobody's come yet, but I don't know if that's, I don't mean to say that I'm so righteous that I want to go to jail. I don't. But if that's where we get to, I don't know how to do anything differently than what I'm doing. I could go do the show in some other country, I guess, and disappear from life. And then try and talk about it from afar, but that just doesn't seem to fit who I am. I don't know. And maybe I could get there, maybe. And if that's where society comes to here, I just think we're in such a dark place there are men who come along. Charlie was one of them. That in the darkness, he started just shining a little bit of light. And in Charlie's case, he shone a big light. He had a big light to shine, and they took him up for it. And does Charlie, can you put Charlie in does he want to go that way? I have no idea. Probably not. Probably wanted to live a long, fruitful life. Watch his kids grow, watch their kids get married, have kids, be a grandparent, all the lovely things. But when the darkness comes, there's just like a choice, I think. Are you gonna ignore it, disappear into it? I don't know. I feel like at times you gotta put you have to make a stand. And I don't mean a stand in a way that I want to go to jail. I don't want to do any of those things.
I had a really good conversation with my buddy Jay Curtis about courage, and about how courage is one of those things where nobody wants to be put in the situation where they will be required to have courage, right? We all think like, I want to be courageous if I'm put in that situation, but nobody wants to be in the situation where you have to prove whether you're courageous. Because, courage is one of those things. There's a concept in philosophy known as the golden mean, right? Courage is not just maximizing, I am not afraid, right? It's like that'd be recklessness, right? And the opposite of recklessness is cowardice, right? I'm not willing to run into anything. But the golden mean is not right in between those two things. You're kind of reckless and kind of not. It is probably closer to reckless, but knowing, hey, I may get hurt in this. Things may not work out. In fact, it appears as though it is likely they won't work out, but the proper way to behave is more towards reckless and danger than it is away from cowardice. And that's why courage is such a high price. And the reason it's a high price is because it does, in order to require it, you have to be in the position where things don't look good. And I think that may be the situation we're in. And I don't know exactly what would be a courageous move right now, but I suspect that it's going to cost everyone something if they want to take the courageous action.
Well, sitting here, father to father, what I don't want to have happen, and maybe it's just inevitable that it will eventually have to happen, is I just don't want my kids to have to deal with this. I don't know if it's maybe you raise your kids differently, but I just look at it and do I want them to understand what's going on in the world? Yes. Do I want them to have to do the things I'm doing? I want them to do whatever the heck they want to do. And I hope to support them, and I hope they become a benefit to society and a good key member of a community and try and instill all those values. But the stuff that we're wrestling with here in Canada these days, I'm like, I don't want them to have to deal with this. So that falls on my shoulders. And so therefore, I have to do what I see as best for the future generation, which is my kids' generation. And that means talking about the insanity that is happening here in our world. I mean, we didn't have Charlie Kirk up here. That doesn't mean it can happen. I certainly do not want it to happen. But we have other insanity going on that is just as insane, and it needs to be talked about. And if we stop talking about it, then eventually it falls to the next generation because they're going to inherit it. So I have no choice but to continue to talk and continue to put things together that I hope spur on meaningful dialogue.
Well, when I try and think about this, I try and think, why is this happening, right? Like, what is the reasoning? And sure, I have a lens through which I see a lot, and that is through the lens of our work and our time. And when you combine work and time, if it's been valuable work, you will receive money for that. And that money goes into a place that you should be able to hold and use in the future. But I believe that we have set up a society where there are enough people that are voting for a government to continue to steal all of the value of our work and our time through not taxes, which they have those, but through printing of money. And as more and more money gets printed, it makes people have to run faster and faster and faster to stay in the same place. And so the very reason we're doing all of this work, which is to make sure that our children, to your point, have the best lives possible, are able to, move forward and explore this universe of ours and have the opportunity to create things. We're not getting to spend any time with our kids because we're working so much harder, and we're having our and both parents having to work. And to me, the reason that so much nihilism has come up, where people are like, there is no future, I have no hope, is because we have set up a democracy that is allowing our politicians to do this to us. And then we're sitting there wondering why everything is going terribly. And yet we are voting for it ourselves.
And yet we're not the first people in history to have this cycle of events. Maybe, don't get me wrong, these are specific to us, but this cycle of events has happened. And so, yes, I was thinking about, I've had Martin Armstrong on here a bunch of times, and he was at the Cornerstone Forum. And in 2020, he talked about 2032. And it really bugged me. I was like, what is he talking about? 2032. I was thinking in days, weeks, maybe a month ahead, not in decades. And, over the course, once again, of a podcast and talking to people such as yourself and others, you just start to expand your horizon. And I like to think kids help with that, because then you start thinking, oh man, what's this gonna, if we go down this track, what's gonna, you just start looking a little further out. And I asked Martin, like 2032, big culmination, of a whole bunch of things culminating, and then there's a change in, is it the U.S., is it globally, take your pick, but basically something happens during that year, roughly. I'm being, like, what is it? Who knows? And off we go in a different direction. And I kept asking Martin, well, how do we get there? Like, how do we? And he's like, I have no idea. Like, it could be just small events. But when you look over the course of just the 2000s and the different events that just slowly are playing out one after another, civil unrest going up, you talking about the wealth capture of, our dollar not buying what it could. So now you have to work harder, and you get, and all these things. And then you take on the trust of every government spot. I don't care what it is declined. Media in the toilet, on and on and on. It's all starting to culminate. Now, is it 2032? I have no idea. But I remember thinking 2032, why does he pick that date? Why does the computer pick that date? And now I sit there and watch, and I'm like, well, it's just playing out. Everything is tightening. Things that make no sense in Canada, we're going to get off of, take something that's outside of someone being killed. The environment. Everybody wants the environment to be healthy and live in a clean place. Yes. So we're going to get rid of coal and natural gas and oil and all the things that make us live the life we have. It makes zero sense. And that is getting ratcheted up. They aren't ratcheting it down. They're ratcheting it up in different terms and different words these days under a new prime minister. They're still there. And so that all those things are just pushing us to this inevitability of civil unrest at a proportion that is not unfathomable, because if you look at history, there's different times where civil unrest becomes so prevalent that it's happening everywhere. And I just see that happening more and more. Like, we had a prison with the child rapist last week in Niagara, where you had a crowd out front of it saying, give them to us. I'm like, this is straight out of some Western movie, and yet they'll probably keep him in, even though any other pedophile rapist in Canada gets out on bail. That one they'll have to keep in, because they know if they let him out, he'll get strung up from the street post. Like, I mean, it'll be bad. And I, sitting here, I'm like, but this is what happens when you allow these events to keep on occurring. We're eventually going to get to a point where those things will happen. They're just lucky they're not charging the gates and ripping them down and going into the prison and dragging them out of there. And if it continues on this track, those things are probably inevitable to happen.
And the mob, once a mob of people, no matter how righteous they feel they are, once they begin, there is no reasoning with them. There is no stopping. It is the most powerful force on earth. And a group of people could gather outside of a prison and think, hey, I'm doing the right thing by ridding the world of this pedophile. But once you give yourself over to the mob, maybe they burn a lot more things down, right? A lot more craziness happens. This is why I'm with you on the ultimately talking is what you have to do, because when people don't feel like they get justice, they will turn to anybody. I probably said this on the show before. You know, one of the most profound things, I lived with an Afghani guy when I was in graduate school. One of the most profound things he told me was, Vance, your story in the United States is that the Taliban came in shooting their way in to get control of these villages. That's not the truth. The truth is the Taliban came in and they spotted all these corrupt judges, and they were watching people not go to jail, and people couldn't get restitution when they would have a conflict with their neighbor. And so what they did was the Taliban came in and started being judges and started extracting really harsh penalties on bad people. It's just that then their circle and their sphere of control just kept growing and growing and growing. So the two opposite poles here are mob justice in order to feel safe, or tyrannical justice of a government that people hand over. And like, the number of paths out of this scenario, I think, gets slimmer and slimmer and slimmer, that one of those two outcomes, it seems really, really likely. And I don't want that, man. I don't want that.
Yeah, I'm rereading Dune right now, right? And you've read Dune, I assume, Vance.
Oh,
I
yeah,
just assume
yeah.
it's, Paul Muad'Dib is sitting there, and he can see all the possibilities of like where they go and all the billions of people who die. And when you talk about the mob, and or just the fact that when conversations aren't allowed to happen, or a narrative is constructed and they don't allow the other side to talk, you get to points where people do extreme things. And then the aftermath of that is anyone's guess, right? And off it goes. And when you look at the future, it's like I don't know where to go. All I know is I want to keep talking about it. I want people to remain peaceful and stand firm in their beliefs with nonviolence, right? And continue to discuss. But I see a future, I just see a future where those things are becoming less and less possible because of actions of people that are forcing some very serious conversations to be had and wrestled with.
When you think about Dune, what's interesting is when you get into the second book and then the third book, it is really about how power is absolutely corrupting. That whoever gets it, whether they started off as the chosen one or not, once they get it, there is just too strong of a temptation to use that power to enhance your own self-interest, which you can talk yourself into. This is for my family. This is for my children. This is for my faith. This is for my whatever. And so it's a great book to be reading right now, because one thing that that grapples with very deeply in that book is the how to exert power. And to your point, I was just reading this statistic this morning about what percentage of people would agree to the phrase political violence is never the right answer. And the boomers, it's something like 79%, and then it goes lower and lower, like until you get all the way down to Gen Z, and only 57% of people believe that violence is never the answer. And I think that this is probably an indication of how far are you away from actual total all-out war. And the more you are further away from that, the more it's difficult for you to imagine what war will be like in that book, All Quiet on the Western Front. right? There are all these students that their teachers get really excited about going off to school or going off to war and how heroic this could be. So they rile up these kids, and the kids go to war thinking they're going to just be so helpful, and they're just mowed down. Their lives are completely meaningless. And the guy that is the main character in the book comes back and realizes that the teacher that was promoting this war had never been to war, was not involved in it at all, had no idea what he was sending people off to. And I think that that's the same thing now, where the further a generation is away from, let's say, World War II or Vietnam, the more likely they are to be like, the war is just something we do in Afghanistan. We send some people over there, we win, and we come back, because they don't have any real perception of it. I don't even have a real perception of it.
Yeah, I don't have I've interviewed lots of military guys, but I have no, and I don't want to, I don't want to have a complete grasp on it, other than I don't want war, right? Like I just sending off our kids, to go fight. When I just look at our government, and I don't know.
So
that's a tough.
We were talking about courage before, and I say this with humility. I do not think that the answer that I'm about to give is going to be the end all be all. There's many, many more things to be done. But I believe that one courageous action everyone could take that would put you in a better position is to understand Bitcoin. And the reason that I think this is, the reason nihilism is occurring is because the government is endlessly stripping out the value of your time and your work. And that Bitcoin is a way to be able to store your life energy, the work you've done, the time you've put into it, the time you spent away from your kids in order to protect their future is deeply important. And Bitcoin is a way to do that. And the thing that requires courage is it is really, really hard to take the first few steps towards Bitcoin if you don't have somebody holding your hand. But once you've done it, once you have said, hey, I'm going to store my life energy in Bitcoin, I'm going to try this buying $50 worth and getting it to a wallet. Once you've done that, you now will be filled with knowledge and wisdom and experience, and that will make you stronger. And then following down this path will continue to increase the amount that you are able to save for your family, so that you have the time to do what needs to be done in whatever future is coming.
Yeah. You think if everybody, let's play this out. Let's say tomorrow you could have 70% of Americans all start putting money into Bitcoin. How does that change the trajectory of the United States?
It depends how they put their money into Bitcoin. If they do the easy thing, which is they go out and buy a Bitcoin ETF, and it sits at their Charles Schwab or their Edward Jones account or whatever, then nothing changes, because you don't actually own your Bitcoin then. Then you have to go to Charles Schwab or Edward Jones and say, excuse me, please, could I get this? And I'm not too worried about the taxes, and I want to make sure that I get this, sent to my bank account. And whenever you get a chance, I know you don't work on the weekends or after 4 o'clock or on any of these holidays. So you're still in that cooperative system. If you actually go out and buy the real Bitcoin yourself, and you take possession of that Bitcoin, you now have a control of money that no one can just take from you. Now, somebody's going to be like, well, they could show up at your house with a gun and tell you to give it to you. Yes, you're right. But at least what they can't do is say, I'm not allowed to send value from me to Shaun. There's nobody that gets in between us when I want to do that. There's nobody that can come along and say, you know what? I know there was 21 million Bitcoin, but I'm going to add another 100 million Bitcoin and give some to myself. Nobody can do that. And you now have possession of this asset that gives you power that other people cannot easily take away from you. So if 70% of Americans decided to do that tomorrow, first of all, the price would be completely insane. Second of all, Bitcoin is hard. And I don't actually think 70% of Americans are intellectually capable of holding Bitcoin. I'm speaking to the people that are intellectually capable. They're curious. They're able to work things out. They're able to figure things out. Even though they may not be a computer person, they're a mechanic. they're a carpenter. If you have logic skills to be able to get yourself through something, you can get through Bitcoin. And then I don't know if everybody needs to get on Bitcoin, but you, the builder, will have a way to save your wealth and your energy so that way when things get hard, you don't have to go to the banks or the investment houses and say, I'm being really good. I didn't say anything I wasn't supposed to say. I didn't make anybody mad at me. Can you please give me my money now?
What I hear is Bitcoin allows you to keep talking. Right?
Fucking right. Yeah, man. I like that. Yeah, that's right. I like that. That's right. Bitcoin allows you to keep talking. It's allowed me to keep talking.
Because once again, I go back to the dark days of COVID. And for a lot of people, what I was doing here had meaning. And their meaning shone through to me through their texts. And you go, in Canada, do we get through COVID without things like the Shaun Newman podcast being there? Yes, we do. Does it go on a different, course? I have no idea. Does somebody else pop up? Probably. As I keep finding out, there was hundreds, if not thousands, of people across Canada doing a similar thing to me. I keep running into them, and I'm just like, oh, how is it possible? We were so siloed, you didn't know you were there. And you look at the March to 2032 in my mind, because I keep having Martin on and he keeps talking about it. And it just seems like everything's starting to trend that way. And you go, okay, so Bitcoin, how does it change the future if there was mass adoption? The conversation continues. And in order to work ourselves out of what quagmire we are certainly in right now, the conversation needs to continue.
Yeah, and people need to have the power that is granted to themselves, right? Right now, so much of, our entire financial system, and Canadians found this out the hard way, in a way that Americans did not, because you watch this trucker rally where they just shut people off. They just said, you just no longer get access to your bank accounts. We were talking about, I mentioned Nick Fuentes earlier. He's a controversial figure in the United States. But no matter who you are, you should say it should not be allowed to just shut his bank accounts off because he said words people didn't like. Just like somebody getting shot shouldn't happen for people not saying what they didn't like. So for me, with Bitcoin, it is one way to get back that deeply important sovereignty so that nobody else gets to be like, you went too far. We're just going to push you out of here.
Well, and in fairness, Vance, I would think at this point, if you're honest with yourself, chances are at some point you are going to go too far because you have a brain and you're thinking and you're going like, just draw your line wherever that is, folks. You just draw it there. Okay, there it is. Okay, there's my line. And they're going to push on that faster than you think, which means eventually you're going to say and do things or try things that are going to get pushed on. And the thing that they are doing, because here in Canada, it was lawyer Eva Chipiak tried buying Bitcoin through her Royal Bank of Canada, shut it out her account, then told her business was too risky, so she had to transfer all of her money out of Royal Bank of Canada because boom, done. This guy right here, I've tried buying Bitcoin through the ATB, and I don't like to crap on the ATB, except they shut down my entire account for like this small amount of money. I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. Even if I am getting fleeced, it's me, the one getting fleeced. And now you've talked to me and I've talked to your manager and on it goes. So eventually we're all going to come to a point, if you have a head on your shoulders and you're looking at society right now, where your line will be crossed and you'll have to say and do things. And the way that they're going to go after you, it seems like it's becoming pretty standard operation here in Canada. They're going to go after your job. They're going to go after your money supply. They're going to attack you.
You make it so you can't travel. Can't fly on a plane. Can't cross the border.
They're going to attack your character, right? The character assassination is real. You're going to come after who you are as a person, and you're going to have things that can allow you to stand firm, right? I don't know if we've talked about this, but you brought up the Genesis, the Garden of Eden. I found the Bible. I found faith. That has been, I was just reading it this morning. Build your house on the rock. Build your house on something that cannot be washed away. And when you talk about Bitcoin, you're talking about something that, government cannot pull away from you. And those ideas have a ton of meaning.
I think that this is why I've been thinking a lot about, like, what is the action you can take, because it feels like everyone should take an action. And I was actually thinking to myself about courage, like, what would courage look like for me? Because courage is going to be different for every other person. For every person, whatever your situation is, whatever you're risking, whatever is difficult for you, whatever opportunity you see. And I know, because I've now walked, I don't know, 150 people through buying Bitcoin, that it takes courage to do it, because it feels like you've heard these things. People say you could get your bank account shut down. Oh, you could lose it all if you lose these keys. Oh, it could be a scam. So it takes courage to walk past all the reasons people have given you not to do this, and to do it, to be like, I am going to try and have just a little piece of sovereignty, a little piece of being able to get away, in the same way that we would all love to have a little piece of property that we could run away to if things get crazy in the cities. This is a little hideout that you have with your money for when they decide that they don't like what you're doing with your money, or who you've supported with your money.
Or when your money goes from, a dozen eggs costs $2 to a dozen eggs costs $50, right? I'm watching the price of Bitcoin and I'm like, man, like, what is the cap for Bitcoin? It seems that there will never be a cap on Bitcoin because of the finite supply, and the fact that it feels like, I could be wrong on this, but it just looks like it's uncontrollable. Or you could do the opposite. It is controllable in a very structured way that you can understand. And that way, what is that, like, over the next 5-10 years, what's it going to do? It has no choice. It has no choice but to go up. I could be wrong on that. You tell me different.
I mean, I believe that it's the scarcest asset in the world, and everyone that encounters it. I have never met a person that went through and successfully bought a Bitcoin or Bitcoin. You don't have to buy a whole one, right? You just buy little pieces of it and move it to a wallet that hasn't become a Bitcoiner, that hasn't been like, oh my, like, you cross a certain thing, let's say the Rubicon, and now you realize, oh, one, I can understand this isn't scary, and two, this isn't going away, and I understand how hard it is. And that hardness is something that we don't have in our regular lives, because almost everything we have is just cheap throwaway garbage, or we have to hand it off to somebody else to let us know when we're allowed to use it, when we have permission to use it. And this will be one of those things that you hold it in your hand and you're like, I own this. This is mine. And there's something tangibly different about that, because we almost own nothing else in our lives.
When I was prepping for this, I was thinking about, my brain went to the most significant. Now, I didn't put in, I maybe should have given it better parameters, but I was using AI. I gave it most significant cultural, societal events in North America over the course of since 2000, right? So you got like 9/11 in there, you got 2008, the financial crisis, but you got other things like gay marriage coming in as like a legal right. You got compelled speech in Canada on she, hey, they, her. You get the point. You got Freedom Convoy. You got Trump. On and on. One of the things that was in there was Facebook, YouTube, Apple, right? Early 2000s, or, I guess, 2004 to 2007, I think it is. And not fully understand, like, sitting here, and now you can see the impact it has had on society. It is insane. It is unbelievably insane. One of the things it did not put in there, and as you talk, I'm like, I wonder how many years we'll look back and I could do the same thought process. Give me the biggest events. And one of them wasn't Bitcoin. And you wonder if in 10 years, 20 years, take your pick, if Bitcoin isn't one of those catalysts that push us into a different future that isn't being controlled by government psyop narratives, on and on and on. Because one of the lines that I really, really enjoyed is, like, I'm taught on this side to question pretty much everything, right? Like, let's ask some questions. Let's get to the bottom of things. And it said we've been put in echo chambers where we question everything but agree on nothing. And now you wonder if in 10 years' time, Vance, we aren't sitting here, hopefully, smiling, some brighter days ahead. Because certainly, you know, as we talk about this, I know you have a lot of great things going on in your life. And I assume you know that on this side, it is the same. But in this conversation, talking about some of the hardships that society is under, you wonder if in 10 years, things aren't brighter. And one of the catalysts we could look at would be Bitcoin.
I mean, to me, the future, once I understood Bitcoin, did become brighter. I mean, like, it's nothing like when you have children, right? Like, there is no cure for nihilism, for self-introspection. You know, I was one of those people that was constantly working on myself before I had children. And then all of a sudden, I didn't have time to work on myself. Who I was is got to be good enough because I got these kids. I got to get dressed and moving and going. And then once you're like in the flow, then you're like, all right, am I being the best version of myself for them? And how much can I push them into the future with good things? And so just like children reoriented my direction, not inward, not towards myself and what was wrong, but towards the future, Bitcoin had this same impact where I wasn't nihilistic about the saving of my money. Now I know no matter how little it is, if my wife and I can save this week, this month, this year, and we can put a little bit more away, that's just a little bit more energy that we're saving away for the future. And so it doesn't have to be in these giant leaps, but it isn't like, you know, who teaches their kid to go put their money in a savings account anymore? Nobody does that. If you do that, it's foolish because your child's savings account is going to be worth less next year than it is this year. And so for the first time in my lifetime, we've been able to save money, save the work that we're doing. And it's hopeful. It's hopeful to me that I can pass my children down something that right now seems very risky, but in the distant future, it won't be risky. It'll be as stable as anything in the world because it's already gone through this hyper stage where people were adopting it. And that stability will be a wonderful thing. 10 years? I don't know. I think it might be a little longer than 10 years, but it's going to happen.
You'd asked a question in text about what does Charlie Kirk look like in 5 years, or how is he remembered? Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think like Martin Luther King or JFK, I think it will be like a scandalizing of the nation, and that the retelling of it will be about how this reshaped the psyche of the Western world, and that it was a turning point for what, I'm not sure. You know, it's just like you know, the telling of any history, things seem like, oh, this action should obviously cause this reaction or this, you know, consequence. But it's just like actually in Dune, where even the slightest change in the initial conditions can wildly change the outcome. So I don't really know, you know, how the public will remember him, but I would assume in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, we will point at this moment and say that it was the shattering of a generation's minds and the way that their psyches really.
Yeah, I think that's I don't know if I could say it better, right? I think of Martin Luther as well. You know, like the sun did come up the next day and society did march on. It just marched on with a giant scar. And that will be remembered for years to come. And one of the lines that I like from Martin Luther King is, our lives begin to end the day we become silent about the things that matter. And I assume there was going to be lines pulled from Charlie Kirk. And I mean, the guy you literally can go watch thousands of hours of him speaking. And I have yet to find one that's like really dull, you know, or you're like, no, this isn't engaging. No, he was an engaging human being who had his house in order and was trying to discuss that with other people. and specifically people that hated his guts. And when you have those two things come together, it is very interesting television. Like, I mean, it is very interesting to sit there and go down a rabbit hole. So I would echo your thoughts. Anything left before I let you out of here?
I think that all of us in the next few weeks, few months are going to be put into positions where you have to make a decision. What is the courageous, wise act? And I think it's really good to think about that ahead of time and to really come to terms with what the future looks like if you don't stand up for what you believe in. But then at the same time, am I sure that I am not being herded into a direction, that I'm not having my energy, my rage, my sadness, my fear herded into getting to do the work of evil, which is the work of a mob, where you're not really responsible for what you're doing. And those two parallels are going to cause all of us to have feelings of angst and how should I handle this? But I believe there's, one truth, and you and your God have to have that conversation about what you ought to do here and make the right choice, because it'll live with you forever.
Vance, appreciate you coming on and doing this. It's never a dull moment when you come on, and certainly this is one of those moments, probably similar to 9/11. I was young back then, but I remember that day like it was yesterday. I understood the significance as a high school kid, and understanding how the adults around me acted specifically on what had happened, and then not understanding like the world has changed. It will be forever changed, and we're going to see a new version here right away. I think with Charlie Kirk, for a lot of people, they watched that and understood the world has changed. We can't fully understand what are going to be all the ripples of that event, but we know for sure the world has changed, and we're going to be paying attention here as the days go on. And appreciate you coming on and discussing with me. I know it's a difficult topic, but at the same time, it needs to be talked about, and I appreciate your thoughts and the way your brain specifically thinks on these things.
Well, thanks for having me, Shaun, and thanks for continuing to do your work. I think, as I've said it many times before, is incredibly important. So